I finally played Pokémon Black 2 White 2. Last year, I ventured into Unova for the first time with Pokémon Black and White. Generation 5 was the only generation of Pokémon I was yet to experience. It was this gaping hole in my Pokémon knowledge that was annoying the hell out of me, so I was itching to get that patched up. Black and White were accomplished, I made a video on that, but the journey is only halfway done, because these games got sequels. So I was very intrigued to play these and see what exactly Game Freak managed to pull out of the hat to justify creating a whole new set of games set in the exact same region as the ones released just a year prior. And Black 2 White 2 are games I've seen people salivate over a lot, so I wanted to see if they lived up to the hype. So let's jump in. So first off, we start in a brand new hometown in these games. Aspertia City is our new base in Black 2 White 2. One thing I immediately found very cool here is that we start our adventure in a city, rather than a tiny little town. That's something I've actually wanted from a Pokemon game for ages. I don't think we always need to start the journey in a tiny village with 2 houses. Let us be a big city kid every once in a while, and have us start in a bustling concrete jungle. So yeah, this was a great change of pace for me. The map opens up a fair bit in Black 2 White 2. There's a few completely new locations, particularly down the western side, and existing locations get some tweaks and additions. Castelia City has a sewer area now, the cold storage in Driftvale City has been replaced with the Pokemon World Tournament, Victory Road's being given a new look. I'm not going to list through them all, you get my drift. It's a sparkly new coat of paint, a jazzed up Unova. They do a lot to reinforce the narrative that a couple of years have passed by in this world since we were last here. But I love how these games look. They look so good for a game released on the regular Nintendo DS, especially when the bigger cutscenes hit. I want to say that some of the cutscenes in these games are better than the cutscenes on the Nintendo Switch titles. Sword and Shield definitely. They do really well considering the hardware they were made for. I ticked over from one month to another while I was doing this playthrough, so I saw summer and autumn during my journey this time around. I wish they could bring seasons back in Pokemon games. But imagine the immense amount of work they'd have to do, considering the map sizes we have now. Probably not going to happen, but you never know. Maybe Game Freak will find a way at some point. But I definitely see why so many people praise these games in that area, because this is certainly the best a pixel sprite Pokemon game has looked. Heart Gold Soul Silver might be on par. I'll let you guys decide on that in the comments. There is something incredibly charming about the sharp, vibrant pixel sprite look to a Pokemon game. Whether it's because I'm nostalgic for it or something else, I don't know. But it's still a fun experience for me even all these years later. I honestly feel like Pokemon could release a new pixel sprite game and I'd have the best time with it. You know, it was funny playing this game after playing Pokemon Scarlet and Violet's Indigo Disc DLC, because there are loads of Unova references in that DLC that I now suddenly understand. A big one for me was walking through Charged Stone Cave and being like, this looks so familiar. Why does it look so familiar? Oh, Charged Stone Cavern. Like, I'm getting the experience in reverse compared to most people. It's so strange. It's good to finally be able to connect all those dots though. I was wondering how these games would manage to weave a story that's accessible to everyone coming into this. What I mean by that is, Black 2 White 2 are sequels, so they follow on from the story of the original Black and White. But as we, and Pokemon themselves will know, every game is going to be someone's first game. There were always going to be players that picked up Black 2 White 2 that didn't play Black and White, and it handles it really well. Of course, there are so many constant references to the originals and their story, but there's nothing you do within these games that requires you to have played Pokemon Black and White first, in my experience anyway. In fact, you could play Black and White second and treat them as a prequel if you wanted to, and it'd still make sense. You wouldn't come away confused. I enjoyed Team Plasma a lot more in these sequels than I did in the originals. Their narrative gets a whole lot more complex here as the team splits into 2 factions. The first being led by N, and the members that stayed loyal to him. They want to atone for their misdeeds of a couple of years ago by devoting themselves to helping Pokemon that have been separated from their trainers. And the second being led by Getsis, who have now dropped the bit. There's no facade of nobility being put forward anymore. They're just straight up bad guys and very upfront about their desires to take over the Unova region. I like this. I particularly like their aesthetic change from the first games to the sequels. In the originals, they dressed themselves like knights, who typically fight for what's good and just. In the sequels, there's more of a sinister look to them. They also have this huge flying ship they use to get around called the Plasma Frigate, which gives them a pirate-like theme. Pirates, of course, being overtly villainous. There's some nice symbolism going on there, I appreciated that a lot. I could say that En's faction was a little underdeveloped, in that they don't give too much to the story, but then again I guess they're not supposed to. The focus is on the faction that's actually trying to affect the region in a massive way. That's just me trying to pick faults for the sake of not being 100% positive about Team Plasma. I could say that the Getsis faction is a bit one-dimensional, but overall, it makes sense. The mask is well and truly off. They're just straight up villains now. I was happy with their role in these games. It felt like their impact was substantial, and the stakes were genuinely high. The big moments were tense and dramatic, and that's what I want from an evil team in a Pokemon game. We get a new rival in these games. Hugh is our counterpart in Black 2 White 2, but our rivalry with Hugh is definitely secondary to his own story and motivations. When we first meet Hugh, he comes across as a character with a very intense determination for something. He's a very fiery personality. As we get into the story, we find out that this burning tenacity was born out of a desire to take vengeance on Team Plasma for stealing his little sister's purloin a couple of years back. Through our early interactions, we see the desire Hugh has to get stronger and stronger, and it almost lures you into thinking that he's one of those kinds of characters who is blindly power obsessed. But as we get into things, it becomes apparent that this is for a noble cause. The main character development we see with Hugh is the gradual realization that true strength comes from a place of compassion and understanding, rather than anger and resentment. And as time goes on, we see him eventually channeling his focus in the right way to get the results he wants. He's a good rival. I do enjoy rivals that have their own subplot and their own motivations outside of being a level marker for your own progress. Hugh adds a nice emotional weight to the story that ties in with everything else going on too. He's not just helping you take down Team Plasma for the hell of it, he has a stake in this whole saga as well. A well-crafted character, very impressed. Speaking of rivals, the rivals from the original games make appearances in these games too, and we get to see how they've moved forward from the events of the previous games. Cherin has honed his craft as a Pokemon trainer, and made his way to become a gym leader in the Unova region. He's the leader of our hometown's gym, where you'll get your first badge. He's a calmer character from the Cherin we met in the original games. It's cool to see him take on that role as the first gym leader though. It felt like a natural progression for him. Bianca also comes back, taking up the role of Professor Juniper's research assistant. She acts as a bit of a guide throughout Black 2 White 2. She personally gives us our starter Pokemon, and shows up at certain points throughout the game to feed us information and help drive certain parts of the story forward. In Black and White, Bianca was kind of a shaky character, a baby compared to where she is now in Black 2 White 2. So it is satisfying to see her striding with confidence as a Pokemon researcher. I've warmed up to both Cherin and Bianca after playing these games, because I wasn't a fan of them in the originals. I did miss a couple of points here and there that helped once I found those out, but I thought they were a bit subpar. Maybe just not to my liking personally. In these games, it's a different story entirely. I actually genuinely like them as characters in Black 2 White 2. The gyms in Black 2 White 2 are mostly the same gym leaders, but the first few are different. We mentioned Cherin being the first gym leader in Aspertia City. We get Roxy in Verbank, whose gym is just really cool, it's this underground rock bar. And Marlon's gym in Humilau City, which has a really fun water puzzle inside. The gyms that do stay the same come with some little tweaks and updates. I like that despite Alyssa moving her gym next door, you can still go into her original gym and ride around on the roller coasters. Because this was my favourite gym in the original Black and White. I'm glad I could still have a little play around in here. Drayden's new look dragon gym is really epic looking too. The gyms did just about enough to make them feel fresh. To be fair, they didn't have to do as much as they did with some of the existing ones. But it was fun to compare them to how they were in the previous games. It again adds to the portrayal of a couple of years having gone by since Black and White. The world has progressed. The people have progressed. The Elite Four is exactly the same as it was in Black and White. Makes sense really. A mere 2 years going by isn't going to shake up the Elite Four in most regions. There didn't need to be any change here. Their teams are adjusted a little bit, but apart from that, it's the same challenge. The rooms they're in are probably the biggest change. They've all had aesthetic revamps. I was super impressed by the Elite Four rooms in Black and White, mainly because it's something we haven't had in the last couple of generations. It was kind of eye-opening to see just what we've lost in recent years. But yeah, a balance of continuity and subtle fresh elements made me enjoy the Elite Four just as much this time around as I did in the original games. The region's champion though is a whole different story. In Black and White it was older. In Black 2 White 2 it's none other than Iris, who was previously a gym leader in Pokémon White version. Older is characterized as a seasoned and wise trainer, whereas Iris is more youthful and energetic. So this change in champion is kind of us seeing the baton being passed down from one generation to the next. It's great to see a gym leader make that step up too. I'd definitely like to see more of that in Pokemon games in the future. Maybe it's the Gen 1 and 2 fan in me that just loves a dragon type region champion too. As for features, Black 2 White 2 adds some interesting new stuff. Pokestar Studios is an entertaining idea. It'd be better if you could do something other than act out scripted battles, but I imagine this was just the limitations of the Nintendo DS coming into play. Still fun to have a go with. The World Tournament is great for battle fanatics, with loads of different characters making special appearances if you keep going back. Join Avenue is something I didn't use but sounded pretty cool for the time. These games are so full of content. Even after completing the base game, there was still so much to do. I went around and visited some of the earlier towns from the original games, caught a Latias in the Dream Yard. A lot of the post-game stuff does revolve around finding returning legendaries, but there's still a lot more outside of that as well. Whole new locations, revisits, you can battle the old champion Older in his house. There's still a good few hours for me to get out of this game even after the credits have rolled, so I'll be steadily making my way through all of that stuff at my own leisure. There's also a challenge mode / easy mode that unlocks after beating the game. The first and only time difficulty levels have been present in a mainline Pokemon game. Very interesting that they experimented with that here, and then never did anything with it ever again. It's something I reckon a lot of people would love to see come back in some way. But yeah, I was really blown away by just how much post-game content there is in these games. Oh, something else to note is that Black 2 White 2 don't follow the same trend as the originals, where only Gen 5 Pokemon can be encountered until the post-game. There are Pokemon from all generations up to this point available throughout the region, from day one. I enjoyed the Gen 5 only thing in Black and White, but I think it would have been a bit unnecessary if they'd done it again with Black 2 White 2 as well. It's smart in a way, because it gives people who played the originals another incentive to come back to Unova and play these sequels, because you have more choice and variety this time around when it comes to building your team. After playing Pokémon Black 2 White 2, I absolutely see why so many fans hold up these games, and in some cases Generation 5 in general, as the peak of Pokémon. They're very rich in character, in content, in charm. I'm actually kind of sad that I never got to experience these games when they were the games, when it was their moment in the spotlight. When did these games release? 2012. What was I doing in 2012? Preparing for the apocalypse, probably. It's a weird feeling to play a Pokemon game and really struggle to find anything sharply critical to say about it without being pedantic or bringing my own subjective biases into it. This experience was great. I really enjoyed it. My god though, Pokemon are going to have to tread very carefully if they want to remake these games. Honestly, a Black 3 White 3 might be the better option, with eShop ports of the originals to keep these stories alive. I don't know if calling them Black 3 White 3 would be the way to go though, because that could give the impression that you have to have played 1 and 2 to understand it. But who knows? Generation 5 is next in the pipeline for a remake or revisit of some sort, so we'll see what ends up happening there. So that was my 2 cents on Pokemon Black 2 White 2. I have now finally played every generation of the Pokemon mainline series. I've filled that gaping hole in my Pokemon library. It's quite a relief to do that. I don't have to shy away from all my friends' Gen 5 live streams now. What are your feelings towards these games? Did you play them when they were first released? If so, please do tell me what your experience of these games was at the time when they were the latest thing. And what do you think Pokemon should do with Generation 5 going forward? It is a bit more of a nuanced situation, isn't it? Because there's 2 sets of games in the same region, one with an extended map. How do we dance around that? Let me know all your thoughts in the comments, all opinions are welcome. While you're down there, please do drop a like on the video. It's a small thing, but it helps massively. Subscribe for more Pokemon content. The channel's growing really nicely at the moment, which is awesome to see considering we're in a bit of a dry spell with Pokemon right now. And that's all down to you guys engaging with the channel, so a massive thank you to everyone for that. I promise to keep trying my best, I'm learning all the time. Thank you so much for watching, take it easy, and I'll catch you all in the next one.